everyone, my name is John, and today we're going to be talking about this little metal cylinder that lives in your basement that you never think about until it's too late. That's right, we're going to be doing some maintenance on our hot water heater to make sure that you get the longest life out of your hot water heater, so you don't have any of those puddles that show up 9 o'clock on a Friday night on a holiday weekend and you're screwed without having your hot water. We're just going to go through a couple basic maintenance items that you should do annually to make sure that your hot water heater is in tip-top shape. First, we're going to go through and drain it out, get rid of any sediment that may be stuck in the bottom. Now, not only does sediment take away volume from your hot water heater, but also it can actually cause excess corrosion on your heating elements if you have an electric heater. And overall, it's just bad for your hot water heater. So we're going to drain it and get rid of any of the sediment that's in the bottom. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to check on the anode rod. Now, this is something typically they can last anywhere from 5 to 10 years. However, depending on how hard your water is, you may have to replace it sooner. It's still a good idea to check it out every year while you're going through and doing this, just to make sure you don't end up with no anode rod. Now, for those of you who don't know, an anode rod is essentially a sacrificial piece of metal that goes inside your hot water heater, and it is designed to corrode. That's right, inside your hot water heater is a steel cylinder, usually lined with glass to help protect that steel from corrosion, but there can get tiny little cracks in that glass, and if that happens, you want to make sure that the steel cylinder does not corrode. Otherwise, you'll end up with a leaky hot water heater. That's right, these hot water heaters can go a long time, but usually they don't just die, they usually start leaking, and they leak because of corrosion. Now, these anode rods, not a lot of people know about, and this is something that if you don't replace it regularly, then instead of the rod corroding, your hot water heater is going to corrode and you're going to get leaks. So just by doing this simple little trick of replacing your anode rod regularly, you can extend the life of your hot water heater by a long time. Now, this rod here will fit most hot water heaters, and it's $20. Cheap insurance for not having to worry about replacing your entire hot water heater. Now, I have just a little hot water heater here. It's 19 gallons. It's mainly meant as a buffer tank for our tankless hot water heater, but the same process can be used for both these small buffer tanks, even if it's small in an apartment or in a cabin, all the way up to the full-size 40, 50, 60 gallon hot water heaters. They all have the same concept. Now, there are some hot water heaters that have an anode rod built into the inlet of the hot water heater. Those ones are a little trickier to get to. You might want to check with the instruction manual on your hot water heater to see what ones they have. Usually those ones that aren't easy to get to have an extended lifetime. They're usually meant to last 10 to 20 years. Still not a bad idea to replace it though, but we're going to go through just a typical procedure to replace your anode rod, or at least check it to see how things are going. First things first though, this water is hot. You do not want to do anything with your hot water heater if it still has hot water in there. You can burn your skin off in a matter of seconds with how hot these hot water heaters keep the water. First thing you're going to want to do, check your instruction manual, see how you have to disconnect or turn off the power. On electric water heaters, it's usually just a breaker or a switch to turn them off. If it's gas, there's usually a knob to actually turn the gas off. What you want to do, plan ahead. End of the year is a great time to do this. Usually with the holidays, you have an extended period of time where you can work with something like this. Keep in mind, when you turn off your hot water heater, you're going to want to let it sit for a while. These tanks are designed to hold the heat in efficiently, so it's going to take a while for that hot water to cool down. It's a good idea to plan this out, whether you have a long weekend or a long holiday, to try and get it done without rushing or burning yourself. Now, I went ahead and I turned my hot water heater off yesterday. It's been almost a full 24 hours. The first thing we're going to want to do is start to drain it. Normally there is a drain here that just accepts a normal hose connection. You want to make sure that you get a nice stiff hose, otherwise the little bit of warmth that's still left in the water is going to cause it to deform. Also, you want to check with your municipality on how you can dump this water. A lot of them let you dump right into a sump pump without any issues. Some you might have to find a drain nearby. Usually there's a drain for the furnace. Other times you might have to actually go into a bucket. Now, luckily for me, I can drain right into my sump pump. So first we're going to go ahead and hook up the drain and start draining out some water. Okay, now because the pipes are shut off, there essentially is a vacuum, so you probably won't get anything coming out of the other end. What we can do first, just to make sure that everything is good, go ahead and crack the water a little bit. Cool, just to make sure that there was at least some water coming out of here. All right, so once you open up your drain all the way, you might have some stuff draining out. I had a little bit here, but then it stuck. Look at all of that sediment. That is all the crap that is at the bottom of your hot water heater that you do not want there. Realistically, you want all that to be clean. Now, my drain is completely open, but nothing is coming out of here, probably because there's so much sediment that is stuck. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna crack open the water a little bit to kind of give some pressure. And now we can see all this stuff coming out. All this sediment that is stuck on the bottom of my hot water heater. That is not something that you want to have in your hot water heater. All right, turn that back off. Now we should start getting stuff to actually drain out. There we go. Now this is going to take a while to drain. One thing we can do to kind of help speed things up is using this high pressure valve and essentially just open up a little bit to kind of break loose that vacuum. You can kind of hear, the air get sucked in, and now it's draining a lot better. What we want to do is we basically just want to drain out a little bit so we're not having any water in the pipes, maybe about an inch below the top of this. We are going to drain it down all the way, but we want to try and get an easier way to break that vacuum without having to hold over this pressure switch. All right, so after we have the water level down a little bit, so we're not just gonna have water spraying at us, we can start to undo the anode rod. Now, you don't wanna empty it down completely because these anode rods are really, really tight. So you can use the weight of the water to kind of help hold the hot water heater in place while you're trying to undo the anode rod. You wanna make sure that you get a properly sized socket and a giant breaker bar to help you out. It's a pretty standard size, and if you're lucky like me, this fits in just perfect. So let's go ahead and break that loose and try and break that vacuum loose so we can drain out the rest of the water. Right, so just like that, as I'm unscrewing this, you can hear the water start to pour out there a lot more. So let's see what this anode rod looks like. It's been a year since I looked at it. Last year it wasn't looking too great. I knew that I was gonna have to replace it. And realistically, oh, yep, that's exactly what you don't wanna see. It's not completely gone, but it definitely is not looking great. Just as a comparison, we've lost a little bit, but this is good though. There's still some left on the anode rod, so it's not completely gone. The last one that I replaced, it was completely gone. Metal, or the inner rod and everything. There was nothing other than the cap. So this is perfect. What we're gonna do now is make sure that it's the right length. With this being a smaller tank, I will have to cut mine. If you have the larger tank, usually you can put it right in. The other thing, if your anode rod is completely gone, if there is nothing that you can tell what the length is, the other thing you can do is basically take your new anode rod, put it all the way in gently, and once it hits the bottom, you know that's how long it is. I would take off at least 2 or 3 inches from it touching the bottom just to make sure that you don't interfere with anything, but that is one way that you can measure it as well. All right, well, now that we have the anode rod unscrewed, the tank is draining all the way, we're gonna let that go all the way down. Even though there's just a little bit of sediment at the bottom, it's still a good idea to drain everything out of there, get everything out that you can, especially, well, on a little tank like this, it's not gonna make that big of a difference, but it's always good to start fresh. This is not something that you wanna skimp out on. You can extend the life of your hot water heater by a lot just by doing these simple things. 30, 40, 50 gallons worth of water, the cost for that is a lot lower than the cost of a new hot water heater. So do it now, make sure you keep up on your maintenance, and you'll thank yourself in the long run. So now that we're waiting for this to drain, I'm gonna go and cut my anode rod to length. Most of you won't have to do that if you're dealing with the full-size heater, but if you are, now's a good time while you wait for the stuff to drain to cut your anode rod to length. It is just magnesium and a steel rod, so you can just take any normal metal blade, whether it's a normal saw, sawzall, whatever. Go ahead and use that to cut your anode rod to length. What a difference, huh? Definitely seen better days. All right, now one thing you want to make sure you do is take off all of this paper. It's definitely going to be tedious. If I remember from last time, this one came out fine, but the other one did not. Essentially, you want to take this off because you don't want paper in your hot water heater. We're trying to get rid of all the sediment. This is going to be going right in your hot water heater. You do not want this in here. It's kind of obnoxious that they have this huge sticker on here, but go ahead and take it off. One thing that may be beneficial if you have residue like this is some steel wool Brillo pad, or even if you have a very, very gentle angle grinder attachment, kind of like a flat paddle or a flap wheel, to just kind of take all of this off. We basically want it to be 100% clean like this part. So let's go ahead and get this taken off. Yeah, just like I thought, this is gonna be a pain in the butt. So I'm gonna go take this outside and take some kind of flap wheel to it or something to try and get this off. Alright, so now that you have the tank fully emptied, we'll want to take a flashlight down in the hole for the anode rod, and you'd be surprised to see how much sediment is still in the tank. Even though we drained everything out, even though there was a bunch of sediment that came out, there's still some along the bottom. So what you can do is actually turn on the cold water just a little bit to kind of stir up that sediment down the bottom and let it drain out. If you're lucky and you get a good flashlight, you should be able to look in the hole, see how much sediment is left, and try and do that flush a couple times to try and get rid of as much of that sediment as we can. So like I said, it does not help with the longevity of the tank. It also doesn't help with preventing corrosion. So we want to try and get all that sediment out, or at least as much as we can out of there. So let's go through and do a couple flushes. All right, so I just took a look in my hot water heater with a flashlight, and holy cow, not only is there a ton of sediment, but there's actually a lot of scale in there too. And that's something that hopefully we can get rid of with the flush. If not, we might have to figure out some way of hooking up a vacuum and getting it in there or something, because there is a lot of scale. I'm gonna see if I can get a picture inside the tank so you can see what I'm talking about. But the amount of sediment and scale in there definitely we want to clean out. So let's get to flushing. All right, just so you guys can see how crazy the amount of sediment and scale is in here, take a look at that. Now, I took out this plug trying to get light in here so I could get a good video of all the sediment and whatnot that's inside this hot water heater. But just by removing this bottom plug, you can see that is completely full of crap. Now, that looks to be mostly scale. I don't know how the heck I'm gonna get that out. I might actually just, take a vacuum cleaner to this or something. But that just shows you how much sediment can accumulate in these hot water heaters. Now, mind you, I drain this hot water heater every year. I don't necessarily go through and do the flush process every year. And this hot water heater is only about 4 or 5 years old. This is the second time that I've had to replace the anode rod, but the first time that I've actually taken off this bottom plug here and seen how much stuff is in the bottom here. That is just ridiculous. That just shows you how important it is to make sure that you truly clean out and flush as much out of here as you can, because look at all that. That is just crazy. All right, so we have a lot more flushing to do. Now, you should know that even with all of this stuff in here, we still have a whole home filter that goes down to 5 microns. Now, yes, that is extremely important and definitely helps and prevent a lot of this sediment and stuff that happens here, but that still doesn't mean that you don't have to go through and clean your hot water heater even if you do have a whole home filter. Still very important to do at least every year, depending on what your water. You know what, so after thinking about it, there's just so much sediment and stuff in here. I'm actually gonna get my shop vac, pour some water in and try and suck all that debris out. I will say, proceed at your own risk. I'm sure this voids the warranty and is not recommended by the manufacturer of the water heater, but I really wanna get all that sediment out, so let's get to vacuuming. It also appears that the old anode rod that completely fell off and was no longer there when I first replaced this many years ago is hanging out there on the bottom. So now I need to go and try and get some tweezers or something to try and get that bad boy out, because I don't want that staying in there. Now that we've gone through and done a couple flushes, tried to get as much of that sediment and scale out as we can, now it's time to put the anode rod back in and get things back together and back heating. All right, so I have the old anode rod here next to the new one. You can see a little bit of a difference. I did end up making it a little bit longer. I measured out how deep the tank was and how far it could go, and it looked like I had a couple extra inches that I could have made it taller. So I went ahead and did that. But now that we have the new one on, let's go ahead and get it installed. Throw some Teflon tape on the threads. Make sure you close the drain. Don't go turn on your water trying to fill up the hot water heater and you have your drain still open and you're just draining all that fresh water out. So make sure you close your drain, tighten it. What you want to do is take the hose off as you're filling so you can make sure if there are any leaks, because depending on how old your system is, it may not tighten all the way. You just have to be careful. Don't overdo it, but make sure that there aren't any leaks. Slowly turn your water on, try and get it fill up as much as it can. Once it's all the way full, you don't hear any more water coming in, do one more double check to make sure there aren't any leaks anywhere, especially on the anode rod. Make sure you put the Teflon on it. Then it's safe. You can go ahead and turn your hot water heater back on. Depending on your water heater, whether it's gas or electric, check your manual. You can even Google it if you need to find the manual for that particular model. They're all pretty standard. Turn your water heater back on. Give it a couple hours. It is going to take a while for it to come up to temp. You'll be able to tell when you turn on the faucet if it's hot or not. But after that, hopefully you should be good. You shouldn't have any problems. Definitely do this every year though. Even if it's just checking to see, okay, you know what, let me drain for a couple minutes just to try and get any loose sediment out there. Check the anode rod just to kind of see how the life of it is. Check it every year so you get in the habit of doing it, because if that anode rod goes bad, then it starts eating away at the tank and you don't want that. That's how you get a low life on your hot water heater. Replace anode rod frequently whenever you notice low. Clear out the sediment and you can have a hot water heater probably outlive the house. So once you have the anode rod mostly tightened down, you'll notice that the hot water heater might actually turn a little bit as you're trying to tighten it. And that's exactly why we left most of the water in there when we were trying to undo it. So now that it's mostly installed, you can go ahead and turn your water back on, let it fill up for a bit, fill it up most of the way, at least enough where you can use it as leverage to help tighten the anode rod all the way, and then go ahead and let it finish filling up. As always, thanks for watching. Like the video if you like it. Leave some comments down below if you want to see any other DIY projects or have a project that you need help on. Thanks everyone. Have a good one.